I grew up in northern New York in a small town surrounded by forests and hunting land. Hunting season was practically a local holiday. Most people owned rifles, and it wasn't unusual for entire families to disappear into the woods for a weekend. My father taught me how to hunt when I was young, and by my early 20s I was comfortable spending entire days in the woods alone. This happened during the final weeks of archery season in November of 2021. There had been an early snowfall that year. Not enough to cover everything, but enough to leave a thin white layer across the ground. It made tracking animals easier, and every footprint stood out clearly. I had permission to hunt on a large tract of private land owned by a retired mechanic named Warren. The property stretched for dozens of acres and consisted mostly of dense timber, an overgrown logging road, and a few open patches where deer often crossed. Deep in the woods sat an abandoned shack that hunters had used decades ago. The roof was collapsing and nobody went near it anymore. I had hunted there several times before and had never seen another person. That morning, I arrived around 5 o'clock while it was still dark. I parked beside an old metal gate and started the walk in with my headlamp. The forest was unnaturally quiet. Even before I reached my stand, I had the strange feeling that someone was watching me. I kept turning around expecting to see another hunter, but every time there was nothing but trees. Eventually, I climbed into my stand and waited for daylight. A little after sunrise, something immediately caught my attention. Roughly 60 yards away stood another tree stand. The problem was that it hadn't been there before. I knew that section of woods well enough to be certain of it. The stand was a cheap metal ladder stand that looked rusted and worn. It appeared old, yet I would have noticed something that obvious on previous trips. What bothered me even more was the trail leading to it. There was only one line of footprints in the snow. The tracks came from deeper in the woods and stopped directly beneath the stand. No tracks left it. I watched the area for nearly an hour, assuming another hunter must have been using the property. Around 8 o'clock, I spotted movement. At first, I thought it was a deer stepping between the trees. Then I realized it was a man. He stood partially hidden behind an oak tree near the stand. He wasn't wearing camouflage. He had on a faded dark sweatshirt and black pants. Even from that distance, something about him felt wrong. He wasn't moving. He was simply staring toward me. After a few moments, he slowly raised one hand and waved. It wasn't a friendly greeting. It felt more like acknowledgement. Like he wanted me to know he had seen me. Uncomfortable but trying to be polite, I raised my hand and waved back. The man stepped behind the tree. Then he disappeared. I waited for him to emerge on the other side. He never did. There was no sound of footsteps. No movement. Nothing. It was as if he had vanished. Later that morning, I climbed down from my stand and decided to investigate. When I reached the tree where I had seen him, I stopped. The snow was untouched. There were no tracks around the tree at all except my own. The only footprints remained the single trail leading toward the strange stand. I followed them. They ended directly beneath it. I looked up. The stand was empty. A thin layer of snow still covered the seat, untouched. I remember feeling my stomach tighten. Something about the situation wasn't right. As I headed back, I noticed a strip of bright orange fabric tied to a branch. Then another. Then another. Each piece looked like it had been cut from a hunter's safety vest. Some were tied high, others low, almost like markers. The deeper I looked, the more I found. For the first time that day, I considered leaving. Around noon, I returned to my truck to eat lunch and warm up. Nothing happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. I convinced myself I was imagining things and headed back out later that afternoon. That decision almost became a huge mistake. About an hour before sunset, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I turned around. Same man stood roughly 30 yards away. This time I could see him clearly. He looked exhausted and filthy. His beard was uneven and tangled. His skin was pale and his eyes looked sunken. The thing that disturbed me most was his smile. It barely moved, just enough to reveal a few teeth. In one hand, he held a screwdriver. He stared at me silently. I asked if he had permission to be on the property. No response. I asked again. Nothing. For several long seconds, we simply looked at each other. Then he turned and walked into the trees. I should have left immediately. Instead, I stayed until dark. As soon as legal shooting light ended, I packed up and started back toward my truck. Halfway there, I noticed more orange markers. This time, some were tied to sticks pushed into the ground. Then I saw something hanging from one, a dead squirrel. Wire had been looped through its hind legs. Beneath it, someone had drawn a rough circle in the snow. Further down the trail, I found more. A rabbit, a crow, all displayed the same way. I started moving much faster. Then about 100 yards from my truck, I froze. Leaning against a tree was my backpack. The same backpack I had left in my stand earlier. The zipper was open. Every item inside had been removed and carefully arranged in the snow. My flashlight, my knife, my gloves, even my spare arrows. Everything had been lined up neatly. Someone had climbed into my stand while I was away. Close enough to touch my gear, close enough to watch me. I grabbed everything and hurried toward the clearing. When I finally reached my truck, my heart nearly stopped. The driver's door was open. I always lock it. Nothing appeared stolen, but paperwork from my glove compartment sat spread across the passenger seat. I jumped inside and locked the doors. As the engine started, I looked toward the tree line. There he was, standing motionless among the trees, watching me. The smile remained on his face. Slowly, he raised one finger and pointed directly at me. Then he dragged that finger across his throat. I slammed the truck into gear and tore out of there. Later, I told Warren everything. He confirmed nobody else had permission to be on the property. The authorities searched the area a couple weeks later. Deep in the woods, they discovered a hidden shelter built from tarps, scrap wood, and old hunting equipment. Inside were animal bones and gear reported stolen from nearby properties. Nobody ever told me whether they found the man responsible. I never returned to that property. And ever since that day, I've been a lot more careful about hunting alone. Because sometimes the feeling that you're being watched isn't your imagination at all.